The first thing I heard was the backup alarm. Beep, beep, beep. It cut through the dark at 5:12 in the morning, sharp enough to pull me out of sleep before my eyes even opened. For a second, I thought it was a garbage truck. Then the smell hit me. Vet concrete. That sour mineral stink drifted through my bedroom window, mixed with diesel exhaust and cold Georgia mud. I sat up so fast the sheets twisted around my legs. Outside, yellow work lights pulsed against the blinds like lightning trapped in a box. By the time my boots hit the back porch, the mixer truck was already angled beside my fence. Its drum turned slow, grinding like a stomach full of rocks. Two workers in reflective vests stood near the old culvert at the rear corner of my property, dragging a chute into place. The culvert mouth, that ugly gray pipe half hidden by weeds and red clay, was already swallowing a ribbon of fresh cement. I froze, not because I didn't understand what I was seeing, because I understood it too well. That pipe wasn't decorative. It wasn't trash. It wasn't some forgotten piece of construction junk left behind by a lazy builder. It carried stormwater off Willow Creek Lane, under the back edge of my lot, and out toward the creek before the low side of the neighborhood could drown. And they were filling it like a pothole. "Stop!" I shouted. My voice cracked across the wet grass. One worker looked up. The other kept guiding the chute. Then I saw her. Marla Whitcomb stood near the truck in a white raincoat, clipboard tucked under one arm, hair sprayed into place like the humidity had signed a contract not to touch her. Even at dawn, she looked polished. Real estate broker polished. The kind of woman who could smile at you while measuring your mailbox for a violation. "Mr. Cole," she said, like I was late to a meeting she had scheduled on my land. "You're up early. You're pouring cement into my culvert." She tilted her head, giving me that soft little neighborhood president smile. "We're correcting a visual and safety hazard. The board approved it." The board. I tasted metal in my mouth. "You can't alter drainage without a permit," I said. Her smile thinned. Behind her, the cement kept sliding down the chute, thick and gray, hitting the bottom of the pipe with a wet slap. "Not every ditch in Georgia requires your personal permission," she said. "This is a beautification project. We have buyers touring this weekend, and that rust-stained pipe is not the first impression Willow Creek Estates deserves." I stepped closer, feeling mud suck at my boots. Water that usually trickled through the culvert had started backing up along the fence line, dark and nervous, searching for anywhere else to go. Above the garage, my security camera blinked red. Marla didn't notice. That was the thing about people like her. They always look for weakness, never lenses. They watched your clothes, your truck, your grass, your tone. They never watched the quiet little black camera under the eave, recording every word while the cement truck's license plate sat perfectly in frame. "Fill it all the way," Marla called over her shoulder. "I don't want that ugly pipe visible by the weekend tour." The worker hesitated. I didn't move. I just stood there in the diesel haze, watching her bury the one piece of infrastructure keeping her perfect street dry. What she didn't know was that my father had helped install that culvert after the flood of 1989. What she didn't know was that water remembers every path humans try to erase. And by sunrise, Marla Whitcomb hadn't fixed an eyesore. She had loaded a river and aimed it straight at her own front door. What would you do if your HOA buried the one thing keeping your neighborhood from flooding? My name is Ethan Cole, and I've spent most of my adult life watching where water goes when people pretend it won't. I am 42, a licensed stormwater engineer, and before I opened my own consulting shop, I worked 7 years as a county drainage inspector. That meant crawling through mud with a flashlight in my teeth, reading old plats that smelled like dust and copier toner, and explaining to angry homeowners that water does not care about property values, board votes, or somebody's weekend open house. Water only cares about gravity. That house in Willow Creek Estates had belonged to my father. It sat on the low back edge of a subdivision, where the trimmed lawns gave way to red clay, pine needles, and the slow brown curl of Willow Creek. Nothing fancy. A brick ranch with a sagging garage door, a workbench scarred by 50 years of tools, and an oak tree that dropped acorns loud enough to sound like hail on the roof. I bought it from his estate because I couldn't stand the thought of strangers painting over his fingerprints. My father, Daniel Cole, had been a road foreman for the county back when men still came home with clay on their boots and sunburns on the backs of their necks. In 1989, before Willow Creek Estates had matching mailboxes and stone entrance signs, a summer storm stalled over that hill for 3 hours. The creek jumped its banks. Runoff came screaming down the grade. 2 neighborhood kids got trapped near the low bend in the road before my father and 3 other men pulled them out waist-deep in brown water. After that, Dad helped install the culvert behind what became my property. He never called it heroic. He called it common sense. In the garage, I still kept his old flood notebook in a dented metal cabinet. The pages were curled yellow at the edges, covered in pencil sketches, rainfall numbers, arrows showing flow direction, and his blocky handwriting. Keep this line open. Always. As a kid, I thought that notebook was boring. As a grown man, I understood it was a map of every mistake the neighborhood had survived. So when I stood there before sunrise watching cement disappear into that pipe, I didn't see an ugly drainage scar. I saw my father's hands. I saw the old floodwater marks still faint on the garage wall. And I saw Marla Whitcomb burying the one warning this neighborhood should have never forgotten. Marla Whitcomb never walked into a room. She arrived like a closing argument. White Lexus, white blazer, white teeth, perfume sharp enough to sting the back of your throat. She had been president of the Willow Creek Estates, HOA, for almost 4 years, and she wore that title like a badge pinned over body armor. Around residents, she smiled. Around contractors, she pointed. Around anyone who questioned her, she developed that soft, wounded voice people use when they want the room to think you were the problem. She was also a real estate broker. That mattered. By spring, 3 high-end homes on Willow Creek Lane were hitting the market, all of them polished to a shine for weekend tours. Fresh pine straw, new shutters, pressure-washed driveways, stone planters by the entrance with flowers so bright they looked fake. Marla called it the Willow Creek Refresh Initiative. I called it makeup over a drainage map. The old culvert behind my property sat near the lowest bend of the subdivision, half shadowed by weeds and red clay. It was not pretty. The concrete lip had rust stains. The pipe mouth carried leaves after every rain. Sometimes frogs tucked themselves into the damp shade and sang after sunset. To Marla, that made it offensive. Her first email came with the subject line, Community Appearance Concern. She asked me to screen the exposed pipe with appropriate evergreen landscaping. I replied politely and attached a short note explaining that stormwater inlets could not be blocked, narrowed, hidden, or planted over without county review. No anger, no insults, just facts. She hated facts the way mold hates sunlight. At the next HOA meeting, she brought it up in front of 20 neighbors, clicking through glossy slides of perfect lawns and fresh paint. Then came a photo of my culvert, zoomed in, cropped ugly, weeds filling the frame like evidence from crime scene. This, she said, tapping the screen with one manicured nail, is the kind of visual neglect that harms community confidence. I could feel people looking at me. I kept my voice even. That pipe moves stormwater. Covering it can create flooding. Marla's smile held, but her knuckles tightened around the remote. Mr. Cole, she said, this community has managed itself beautifully without engineering lectures. That was when I knew she had stopped seeing a pipe. She saw an obstacle, and people like Marla do not study obstacles. They remove them, then call the damage improvement. By 7:30, the truck was gone, but the smell stayed. Cement has a way of announcing itself long after the crew leaves. It sat in the air, chalky and wet, clinging to the fence boards and the cuffs of my jeans. Behind my property, the culvert mouth had become a gray plug with trowel marks scratched across the surface like somebody had tried to erase a wound with frosting. The water had nowhere to go. At first, it only trembled along the fence line, a thin brown sheet gathering leaves and pine needles. Then it spread into the low grass, slow and stubborn, carrying that swampy smell of trapped runoff. I took photos from 3 angles, close enough to show the fresh cement, wide enough to show the standing water, and one with a garage camera in the frame. Documentation beats volume. My father taught me that with a tape measure. The county taught me that with subpoenas. I called the stormwater office first. Weekend staffing. Voicemail. I left my name, address, license number, and a calm description of what had been done. Then I sent an email so there would be a timestamp. By noon, Marla made her next move. A certified letter landed on my porch in a white envelope thick enough to feel expensive. The paper inside smelled like fresh toner and fake authority. Notice of violation. Standing water hazard. Mosquito breeding risk. Failure to maintain drainage area. Unapproved private drainage modification creating nuisance conditions. I read it twice, standing barefoot in my kitchen while the refrigerator hummed behind me. They filled the culvert. Then they fined me for the water. The amount was $200 immediately, $50 a day until corrected, plus a warning that continued non-compliance could result in HOA-directed remediation at owner expense. That last line almost made me laugh. Almost. I drove to the HOA office with mud still dried on my boots. Marla sat behind the conference table like she had been waiting for her portrait to be painted. Her clipboard lay beside a ceramic mug that said, "Lead with kindness." "You need to withdraw this," I said, placing the letter on the table. She glanced at it like I had handed her a grocery receipt. "The board has an obligation to address hazards. You created the hazard." Her smile did not move. "We corrected an exposed drainage scar on a visual common boundary. Show me the permit." That finally reached her eyes. For half a second, the room went still except for the tick of the cheap wall clock and the air conditioner rattling above us. Then she folded her hands. "Mr. Cole, not every ditch in Georgia is a federal project. Sometimes a pipe is just trash." There it was. Not ignorance. Confidence. The kind that makes people dangerous. I looked at her polished nails, her perfect blazer, the violation letter between us, and I felt every loud part of me go quiet. She mistook that silence for surrender. I knew better. Silence is where a paper trail starts breathing. Rain started at 9:18 that night. Not a sprinkle. Not one of those soft Georgia rains that taps politely on the roof and leaves the air smelling clean. This came in hard, sideways, angry. The gutters started growling first. Then the downspouts choked. Then the whole house seemed to tense under the weight of water hitting shingles, siding, glass. I stood in the garage with the door open, rain mist blowing across my boots, watching the low corner of my yard disappear inch by inch. The culvert should have been drinking by then. That was its job. Water came down Willow Creek Lane, rolled through the shallow swale, slipped into that pipe, and moved under control toward the creek. Quiet, boring, effective. But now the pipe was a cement tomb. Water hit the gray plug and curled back on itself, confused at first, then violent. It spread along my fence, climbed over the grass, and found the next lowest path, straight toward Marla's perfect street. I had already sent the warning email that afternoon. I kept it clean. No threats, no insults, just the facts. Blocked drainage structure, incoming storm, risk of roadway flooding, urgent county review requested. I copied the stormwater office and the HOA board. Nobody answered, so I documented. I set a measuring stake near the fence line. I took photos every 15 minutes. My garage camera caught the brown water rising in the glow of the motion light. Rain hammered the metal roof, so loud it sounded like gravel being poured from the sky. By 10:30, Willow Creek Lane was gone. The streetlights reflected off moving water where asphalt should have been. Mulch floated past the curb. Trash bins bobbed like little black boats. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm started screaming, then died under the rain. Then came the first shout. I walked to the front porch and saw residents standing in driveways, barefoot, panicked, holding flashlights over garage doors as water pushed inside. The clubhouse parking lot had turned into a brown pond. One of Marla's new listing signs leaned sideways, the smiling realtor photo splattered with mud. My phone buzzed. The neighborhood group chat lit up like a power line in a storm. Emergency flooding. Who is responsible for drainage? Water coming into my garage. This started behind Cole's property. Then Marla posted, due to improper private drainage conditions at the rear boundary, Willow Creek Estates is experiencing localized flooding. The HOA is assessing owner responsibility. I stared at that sentence while rainwater dripped from my jacket onto the porch boards. She had buried the culvert. She had ignored the warning. Now she was handing the whole neighborhood my name like a sandbag. I opened my laptop on the kitchen table, pulled up the camera footage, and watched her white raincoat glow in the dawn recording. Marla had just made the one mistake every bully makes. She blamed me before checking what I had recorded. At 11:04 p.m., while rain still hammered the roof, I stopped trying to explain myself in the neighborhood chat. That was Marla's courtroom. She had the fear, the caps lock, and half a dozen panicked homeowners looking for someone to blame. I knew better than to argue inside a burning room. So I built a file. The kitchen smelled like wet boots, black coffee, and the faint metallic bite of stormwater dripping off my jacket onto the tile. I opened my laptop, plugged in the external drive, and pulled the garage camera footage first. There she was, Marla Whitcomb in that white raincoat, standing beside the mixer truck before sunrise. The headlights made the rain shine around her like stage lights. I zoomed in until the license plate sharpened. Then I scrubbed the audio back and played it again. Fill it all the way. I don't want that ugly pipe visible by the weekend tour. Her voice came through thin and cold, buried under diesel rumble, but clear enough. I saved 3 copies. Then I opened the county permit portal. 7 years working drainage inspection teaches you where people hide mistakes. And the first place is usually inside paperwork that does not exist. I searched my address. Nothing. I searched Willow Creek Estates. Nothing. I searched Culvert abandonment, stormwater modification, grading, drainage alteration, emergency repair. Still nothing. No permit. No inspection request. No engineering review. No approved work order. Just cement in a drainage structure and Marla calling it landscaping. By midnight, the rain had softened into a steady hiss. I went to the garage and opened the dented metal cabinet under my father's workbench. The drawer stuck the way it always did, metal grinding against metal, then popped loose with a sound that made the whole room feel older. Dad's flood notebook was exactly where I kept it. The cover smelled like dust and machine oil. I turned the pages slowly, careful with the brittle corners. There were his pencil sketches from 1989, arrows showing runoff coming down the hill, measurements along the rear boundary, and one note underlined twice. Keep this line open. Always. Behind the notebook was an old plat folded into quarters, yellowed at the seams. My father had marked it years ago with blue pencil. A 20-foot drainage easement ran behind my property like a quiet vein, connecting Willow Creek Lane to the creek bed. That blue marking hit me harder than I expected. The next morning, after 3 hours of sleep, I called the county records office and requested the stormwater layer for our subdivision. When a map came through, I stared at the screen while my coffee went cold. Drainage line D17. Same path. Same culvert. Same blue designation. The pipe Marla called trash was part of a recorded stormwater conveyance. Then the last piece landed in my inbox. A neighbor who had quietly apologized for believing Marla forwarded me the latest HOA expense packet. Buried between mulch invoices and entrance flowers was a payment marked landscape beautification, rear boundary correction. Vendeur, Whitcomb Outdoor Solutions. Owner, Travis Whitcomb. Marla's younger brother. I sat back and listened to the last drops of rain ticking from the gutters. The street outside was still flooded. Residents were still angry. Marla was still blaming me. But the paper trail was breathing now, and it had her fingerprints all over it. By 8 that morning, I had stopped drinking coffee and started writing like every sentence might be read under oath. The rain had left Willow Creek Estates smelling like mud, wet mulch, and ruined drywall. Pumps groaned in garages down the street. Residents dragged soaked storage bins into driveways. Marla's listing signs stood crooked in the brown wash, their glossy smiles peeling at the corners. I attached the camera clip first, then the no permit search results, then the 1989 drainage easement, the county stormwater map showing drainage line D17, the invoice to Whitcomb Outdoor Solutions, and my short hydrology memo tracing the water from the block culvert to Willow Creek Lane. No adjectives, no outright, just dates, elevations, flow direction, and one simple conclusion. The flood was not caused by my property. It was caused by an unauthorized obstruction inside a recorded drainage easement. I sent the complaint to County Stormwater Enforcement at 8:37 a.m. At 10:12, a white county truck rolled up in front of my house. Dana Ruiz stepped out wearing rubber boots, a dark rain jacket, and the expression of somebody who had already heard 3 different lies before breakfast. I knew Dana from my inspection days. She was not warm. She was not rude. She was worse for people like Marla. She was careful. Dana walked the fence line without saying much. Her boots sank into the mud. She crouched by the cemented culvert, scraped the surface with a screwdriver, then looked at the standing water curling back toward the street. Marla arrived 5 minutes later in her Lexus, stepping around puddles like the ground had personally insulted her. "I'm glad you're here," she said to Dana. "The HOA has been dealing with Mr. Cole's neglected drainage issue for months." Dana didn't look at me. She looked at the plug of cement. "This isn't neglected drainage," she said. "This is a blocked conveyance." Marla's smile twitched. It was landscaping. Dana opened the folder I had handed her and turned one page. Landscaping doesn't usually require a mixer truck before sunrise. The air went quiet except for water dripping off pine branches. Marla tried again, softer this time, wounded this time. She talked about safety, mosquitoes, neighborhood appearance, weekend buyers. Dana let her talk until the words ran out. Then she pointed to the map. "Drainage line D17 is county protected," Dana said. "No one alters it without review." By noon, the orange notice was zip-tied to the fence. Emergency stormwater enforcement. Unauthorized obstruction. Immediate restoration required. Formal hearing within 72 hours. Marla stared at that paper like it had slapped her. I didn't smile. I'd learned a long time ago that water does not need applause when it proves a point. The county hearing room smelled like damp coats, floor wax, and the kind of coffee that had been burning since sunrise. Every chair was full. Residents from Willow Creek Estates lined the back wall with crossed arms and tired faces. You could still see the flood on them. Mud on sneaker soles. Dark half-moons under their eyes. One man had a stack of garage repair estimates folded in his hand. Another woman kept scrolling through photos of water against her foundation, her thumb moving like a nervous tick. Most of them had come expecting to watch me get blamed. Marla sat at the front table in a white suit, because of course she did. Even after a flood, she dressed like a listing appointment. Travis Whitcomb sat 2 chairs behind her, thick arms folded, work boots clean enough to tell me he had not been near shovel that morning. Dana Ruiz stood near the projector with the orange enforcement notice clipped to her folder. Marla spoke first. She used her soft voice. The wounded one. She talked about neighborhood safety, mosquito hazards, visual blight, and how the HOA had acted in good faith to correct a long-standing drainage concern caused by my property. She said my name 6 times. Each time, she looked back at the residents like she was handing them a match. Then Dana looked at me. "Mr. Cole, you may present your documentation." I stood up with my folder. My hands were steady. That surprised me a little. I started with the video. The room watched Marla's white raincoat appear on the screen before dawn, glowing under the mixer truck lights. The audio crackled. Diesel rumbled. Then her voice filled the room. "Fill it all the way. I don't want that ugly pipe visible by the weekend tour." Nobody coughed. Nobody shifted. Silence landed hard. Marla's mouth opened, but Dana raised one finger. "You'll have a chance to respond." Next came the permit search. No approved Culvert abandonment. No estorbater modification. No grading permit. No drainage adulteration. No emergency repair authorization. Just a blank record where lawful work should have been. Then I showed the 1989 recorded drainage easement. The old plat appeared on the projector, yellowed and crooked from years in my father's cabinet. The 20-foot strip ran behind my property like it had been waiting 3 decades for someone to tell the truth. I overlaid the county stormwater map beside it. Drainage line D17. Same path, same structure, same outlet toward Willow Creek. The woman in the back with the foundation photos lowered her phone. I brought up the invoice next. Landscape beautification, rear boundary correction. Paid from HOA funds. Vendeur, Whitcomb Outdoor Solutions. Owner, Travis Whitcomb. That was when the room finally moved. Heads turned, not toward me this time, but toward Travis. his face flushed red from the neck up. Marla stared straight ahead, jaw locked so tight I could see the muscle jump. Last came the hydrology memo. No drama. Just elevations, rainfall, flow arrows, blocked conveyance, and the path the water took after the culvert was plugged. The projector showed the street, the clubhouse parking lot, and the 3 flooded garages. Not opinion, not revenge. Cause and effect. Dana stepped forward when I finished. This office finds probable unauthorized obstruction of a recorded stormwater conveyance, she said. Immediate removal of the cement plug is ordered. Restoration will be performed under county supervision at HOA expense. Civil penalties are pending. The invoice and funding issue will be referred for further review. Marla finally stood. This is a misunderstanding. The county attorney looked at the paused video, still on the screen, Marla's white raincoat frozen beside the truck. No, he said. It's documented. And for the first time since sunrise, nobody in Willow Creek Estates was looking at me like the problem. They were looking at the woman who had buried the drain and called the flood my fault. The cement came out 2 mornings later. Not quietly, not cleanly. A county crew brought in a saw, a breaker, and a vacuum truck that growled at the edge of my yard like some metal animal. The air filled with concrete dust and diesel. Every time the breaker hit the plug, the sound cracked across Willow Creek Estates and bounced off those perfect brick fronts Marla had been so desperate to impress. Chunks of gray cement came out first, then mud, then trapped water. It burst through the opening in a brown rush, carrying leaves, pine needles, and little pieces of broken concrete into the ditch like the pipe was coughing up everything Marla had forced down its throat. For a few seconds, nobody talked. Even the crew stopped and watched the flow settle back into its old path. Then I saw it. Under the mud, on the lip of the culvert, a faded blue stripe showed through. My father's mark. 34 years old, almost erased by weather, almost buried by ego, but still there. That little streak of paint matched the old map, matched the easement, matched the truth. I reached down and wiped it with my thumb. And for the first time since the truck woke me before sunrise, I let myself breathe. Water moved through the pipe with a hollow, steady sound. Not dramatic, just correct. 3 days later, the HOA held an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. Marla tried to resign for personal reasons, but the room did not let her float away that clean. Residents had seen the footage. They had seen the invoice. They had seen the permit record with nothing in it but silence. She was removed by vote before her resignation could become a performance. Whitcomb Outdoor Solutions went under county review. The HOA was ordered to pay for restoration, engineering costs, and the first round of penalties. A formal apology arrived in my mailbox on thick paper with the HOA seal at the top, the same kind of paper they had used to fine me for the water they created. I kept it, not because I needed the apology, because documentation matters. That evening, I put my father's flood notebook back in a metal cabinet under the workbench. The garage smelled like oil, old paper, and rain drying off concrete. Outside, Willow Creek Lane was clear. The clubhouse parking lot was dry. The low bend in the road looked ordinary again. That was the beauty of good infrastructure. When it works, nobody notices. When people like Marla break it, the truth rises fast. They thought cement could bury the evidence. They thought a clipboard could overrule gravity. They thought calling me the problem would make the water forget where it was supposed to go. But water has a memory, and justice, when you build it right, always finds the lowest point.